Hi, I'm Quinn and I'm autistic. Welcome to Autistic. Someone asked a question on Twitter the other day about autistic masking. At what stage of life do autistic people start masking? They wondered if they could cast their mind back to remember and reclaim their former unmasked selves. Like many questions about autistic life, there's no definitive answer because our lives are so varied, but there is still a common factor behind every autistic mask. Now, I'll point out that not every autist masks themselves. Some of us are so obviously different that masking wouldn't hide it. We may lack the desire to blend in, or we may not possess the required skills. Some of us used to mask but gave up when it nearly broke us. Most of us who mix with neurotypical people regularly do mask ourselves in some way, and it can be a very hard habit to break. Even those of us who you wouldn't expect to be masking, those the press, the ill-informed and the malicious like to call severe, or the latest crass buzzword, profoundly autistic, often suppress a significant part of their natures too. Here I am on YouTube talking about my own autistic life in full view, and I still catch myself masking sometimes. The point that we start to mask ourselves is the moment we realise that people don't like the real, authentic version of ourselves, and that often happens when we're very young. In my own case, it was before I started school. Shortly before my 4th birthday, my mother joined a local group called Young Wives, which met every week in a local church. Not all of them were that young, and not all were married, but every member had young children. The mums would meet in one room and drink tea, dunk custard creams, and sometimes have guest speakers, whilst the kids would be occupied in the main church hall, where there was a big wooden box full of toys for us to play with, and one of the mums would volunteer to be on hand to make sure we didn't skewer each other with kaplunk sticks. I used to look forward to it every week. We weren't very well off back then, and I didn't have much in the way of toys at the time, so I loved it. Even then, I was happiest on my own, and once I'd grabbed a toy I liked the look of, I'd find a space of my own and disappear into my own little world. There was one girl there I still remember distinctly to this day. I don't remember her name, but I do remember I always thought of her as Jemima, because her bunched black hair reminded me of the rag doll of the same name in the BBC's Play School programme. I'm glad it was Jemima she reminded me of, because if it was Hamble, I'd have had nightmares. Jemima always hogged the one and only rocking horse in the hall. If any other kid asked for a go, she'd push them away, then scream her lungs out until the mum in charge would let her have her way, rather than explain to Jemima's prim and proper mum why her daughter was screaming the place down. Of course, Jemima never did it when her mum was in earshot. Other than the terrible noise, her antics didn't bother me in my little autistic bubble. I wasn't interested in the old tinplate rocking horse with its chipped paintwork and rusty springs, so I was never the target of her anger. The kids who'd been unable to get a turn on the rocking horse often got plonked next to me, being the quiet one, and told to join me in whatever I was playing with. They'd usually trash the carefully curated order in which I'd lined up or stacked whatever toy I was playing with, so I got more annoyed at them than at Jemima's screaming. One of my favourite toys was a box full of coloured wooden blocks, cobbled together from several different sets of different colours and sizes, that I experimented with, finding different ways of arranging them in categories or patterns that pleased me. One week, something new appeared. Someone had donated a partial set of blocks in a wooden trolley with a handle and wheels, so they could be pushed around. They're still sold today, or I wouldn't have found so many pictures like the one you're looking at now. The first time I saw the trolley, I just used the box part of it to neatly line up my blocks in various patterns, even building a pyramid of blocks of corresponding colours and sizes. You can tell I was proud of it because I can still picture it vividly to this day. The following week I had an idea though. I'd seen some older kids in the park playing on scooters, and when I looked at the brick trolley this week, I didn't see a platform for building replicas of the great wonders of the world. I saw a four-wheeled, quin-sized scooter. I tipped all the bricks out with every intention of having a good old sort out later, stepped into the bed of the trolley, gripped the handle and started zooming, well, maybe trundling around the bare wooden floor of the church hall. I was loving it. I was a pint-sized Hell's Angel riding around on my wooden road hog, tearing the place up like a good 'un, and I was in heaven. The presiding mum kept an eye on me, but she was smiling. A moment later she came over and started pushing me around, and I shouted with glee. What happened then, you might ask? I'll tell you. Jemima happened. She stopped rocking and started screaming again. Only this time there was nobody trying to muscle in on her rocking horse action. She was pointing at me, shrieking, "Naughty boy! Naughty boy!" The mum stopped pushing me and ran over to ask Jemima to quieten down, and what I was doing wasn't naughty. But Jemima was having none of it. She carried on shouting, "Naughty boy!" and it didn't take long for some of the others to join in. In a few short minutes I'd gone from whizzing around my own personal Route 66 to being at the centre of a group of screaming infants baying for blood. I started to cry myself, and the mum took me into the corner and sat me down, promising me a glass of weak lemon squash and a biscuit. A couple of the other mums rushed in to see what the fuss was about, including Jemima's mum, who dashed to her side. My mum ran in too, and my tears soon subsided in a cloud of mum cuddles. Then there was a commotion from the hall. Whilst I'd been crying, Jemima had not only recovered, but had mounted my impromptu scooter, and now her mum was pushing her around, whilst the other kids excitedly begged to have a go themselves. I started crying again. I didn't have the words to express it, but I had just been introduced to selfishness and hypocrisy. It's my earliest memory of understanding the deceit and self-centred egoism of others that I would never unlearn, not just from the kids, but their mums too, who cast me as the villain. It was the trigger that set me on a decades-long path of pretending to be someone else. If people couldn't know me, it was harder to pick on me. And if they didn't know what I liked, they wouldn't know what to take away. It was a pattern that buried my true self away until I was well into my 40s. It took me some years to perfect that mask, but once I'd cracked the code, it worked. It offered me the anonymity I needed so I could spend the rest of my life trying to fathom why other people lied, cheated, manipulated, and hurt each other. My tale is unique to me, and so is the genesis of every autistic mask. Many people cite starting school or kindergarten as the point they realised they couldn't afford to be themselves. For others it's church, visiting family, or even their own parents that teach them that most unwelcome of lessons. People don't like the real you, so you better hide it if you want to survive. It can be a gradual process, or it can be a brutal moment of crystal clarity. The realisation comes when we're ridiculed, taken advantage of, manipulated, gaslighted, beaten, bullied, told we're stupid or strange, not normal. We're faced with a choice of a life of exclusion, struggle, and potential misery, or living a lie that drains us of every ounce of our emotional energy and self-esteem. The question asked at the beginning of this video is an important one. Not everyone has the same pin-sharp recall of their childhood as I have, but you may be surprised how many autistic people do. If we decide later in life that the heavy toll of masking is too much and wish to reclaim the sense of self we've buried all our lives, remembering the point it started, can be a great help. There's a cathartic comfort in realising how long you've done it and how deeply it's ingrained. Even the understanding that the trigger has been lost to time and trauma, and you'll never remember living any other way, can make the process of emerging from the darkness that lies behind the mask a little easier. But whilst it's important to ask how and when we started masking, there's an even bigger, more urgent question that desperately needs answering. My mask started forming in the 1970s, before I knew I was autistic, and before most of the world had even heard that autistic people existed. In the 21st century, after hundreds of years of social reform and improvements in education, and 80 years since autism first started to gain attention, the real question is, why do we still have to do it? Thank you for watching. If you like this video, or if you've learned something and think other people could learn something valuable too, then please make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel and comment to nudge that YouTube algorithm into pushing Autistic videos to new people. You can help even more by committing a modest monthly pledge on Patreon to help fund future videos, or pick up one of our exclusive merch designs on TeePublic. There's links in the description.